They don't ask if you're guilty. Not yet. Because the question doesn't come first. The whip does. You're led into a chamber lit by a single torch. The stone walls drip with moisture. The air smells like mould and meat. In one corner, a rope dangles from a ceiling beam. In the other, the executioner stands, already turning the whip in his hands, testing its weight, as if your body is just a surface to strike. You're told to strip. You hesitate. You shouldn't have. They rip the fabric from your arms like it's parchment. Your back is bare now, your hair loose. You're breathing shallow. There is no crowd, no court, only men with rope, law etched into their knuckles, and power that doesn't need explanation. You haven't confessed. You haven't even spoken. But they call this preparation. Because women, they say, lie. And to make the truth rise to the surface, the body must first be broken. You're tied to a post. The ropes dig into your wrists and ankles. You feel your pulse throb against them. You hear the hiss of leather slicing the air, and then impact. The first strike takes your breath. The second steals your voice. By the third, you forget your own name. They don't count the lashes. They watch your reactions. If you scream, you're faking. If you cry, you're weak. If you stay silent, you're hiding something darker. There is no right way to bleed. The whip was not just a tool of punishment. In the Dark Ages, it was prelude to confession, to accusation, to death. And women bore it differently, not because they were weaker, but because their pain meant something else. A man might be whipped for theft or betrayal or treason, but a woman for disobedience, for immodesty, for speaking when she wasn't asked, for surviving something that embarrassed the men around her. The skin on your back splits in thin, dark lines. Each cut isn't deep, but it doesn't have to be. The whip is patient. It returns to the same place again and again until your body no longer knows where it begins or ends. You feel the blood, warm, thin, slow at first, then faster. The whip curves across your shoulder blade, across the spine, across the ribs. It touches everything you cannot see and makes you remember what you try to forget, that you are breakable. They pause only when your knees buckle, when the floor is slick beneath your feet. Then they ask, do you confess? Confess what? They haven't told you, because the question isn't about the truth. It's about surrender, and surrender sounds the same whether you're guilty or not, so you nod. Not because it's real, but because you want the next strike to be the last. They smile. They say, she's ready now. But the whip doesn't stop, because now the real questions begin. Now the torture has purpose. Now they will ask about demons and lovers and secret rituals. Now they will demand names. Now they will expect answers soaked in blood and shame and submission. And if your answers come too slowly, the whip will speak again. This was the beginning for thousands of women across the Dark Ages. Not witches yet, not criminals yet, just bodies, prepared for interrogation. The whip wasn't punishment. It was a ritual, and you were never meant to survive it intact. They unwrap it like a relic, not with reverence, but with routine, as if the pain it brings has long been memorized. The executioner holds it in his palm, turning it over slowly. Its shape is deceptive, curved, smooth, almost delicate. A small metal object, shaped like a fruit, shaped like a pear. But this pear blooms. A crank at the base makes its petals open bit by bit, like a flower or a trap. You ask what it's for, they don't answer, because the answer is already carved into the air between you. They call it the choke pear, or the pear of anguish. Its names change with the borders, its cruelty never does. Sometimes it is forced into the mouth, to silence, to punish a woman who gossiped, who cursed, who dared raise her voice in court. Sometimes it is pushed into the rectum, for women accused of sodomy or blasphemy. But most often, it is forced into the vagina. You're told to lie back. Your hands are bound above your head, Your legs are forced apart, the air is cold, the stone beneath you is colder. The device slides in easily at first. That is the trick. The pain doesn't come with insertion, it comes with expansion. They turn the crank. Slowly. With the precision of someone lighting a candle, each rotation causes the pear to unfold. 4 curved petals bloom inside you. The metal stretches what should never be stretched. It pushes against nerves, muscle, bone. The pain doesn't scream. It rips. You don't bleed, not at first, but the tearing begins deep and then spreads outward. A burning that climbs into your belly and nests in your lungs. You gasp, but the air betrays you. Your mouth is dry. Your eyes roll. You try to faint, but the agony keeps you awake. Because this isn't just torture, it's targeted. The body is being punished in the one place it was never allowed to belong to you. You're being told that your voice, your desire, your disobedience, all come from a part of you they can reach, so they reach it. Women accused of sexual deviance, real or imagined, were often given the pear, not to extract a confession, but to destroy, to ruin the very thing they claimed had sinned. They said it was about cleansing, about repentance. But the truth is simpler. It was about obliteration. The device was removed only when the scream stopped, or when the body sagged. Sometimes they pulled it out while still open, ripping muscle as it left. Sometimes they left it in, let it rot inside, let the infection finish what the metal began. And then they wrote it down. They documented the pain as a necessary act. They called it a tool of the righteous, a mechanism of justice, a method of correction. But the pear wasn't made to correct anything. It was made to send a message that your body, once defiant, could be made small, could be rearranged, could be shattered from within. No one wore scars from the pear on the outside, but they walked differently after. They spoke less. They did not marry, or they married without trust, or they learned to lock their thoughts behind their teeth, because the pear taught them what silence felt like, from the inside out. And that kind of silence never fades. You think it's over when they stop asking questions, but the silence is only the beginning. They bring out the shoes next. Not slippers, not sandals, not anything meant for walking. These are shoes made of iron, thick, heavy, shaped crudely like boots, but hollow and dark inside. They've been placed in a fire long enough that the metal glows red along the edges. You can feel their heat from across the room. You're told to sit. You hesitate. You plead. You scream that you don't understand the crime, but the guards don't flinch. Because this isn't a punishment for what you've done. It's for who you are, a woman accused of lust, or pride, or of tempting men with how you walk, how you speak, how your eyes linger. They say you led someone into sin, so now you will walk it back. They bring the shoes forward on long metal poles. You smell them before they touch your skin. Burnt coal, scorched iron, the lingering stench of old pain. Someone grabs your ankles, another pins your arms, and then the shoes are fastened to your feet. The moment the hot metal kisses your skin, your world fractures. The iron seals around the flesh, cooking it instantly. Your toes curl in reflex, pressing against the inside walls of a furnace, but you cannot move, because the next part is worse. They make you stand. The weight of the shoes alone would be enough to cripple, but now your feet are blistering inside them, nerves exposed, bones beginning to swell against hot steel. You wobble, they strike you, and then they say it. Walk. The floor has been prepared, not flat stone, but a narrow path of coals, ash, sometimes even iron plates, still warm from the fire. Each step you take is agony inside and beneath. You don't walk, you crawl upward through pain, and still they strike, urging you forward, calling you things, temptress, demon, animal. The words sting in a different way because once someone called you daughter. Once you were a girl who danced. Now you are a lesson. a warning wrapped in torn skin. The iron shoes came in many forms. Some were nailed shut once your feet were inside. Some had spikes, forcing the wearer to walk with blood in every step. Some were used in religious rituals, where monks or priests watched to see how long your faith would hold before your legs collapsed. No one watched to see if you lived. That wasn't the point. This wasn't about confession or even death. It was about breaking motion itself. Women in the Dark Ages were punished not just for what they said, or who they loved, or how they disobeyed, but for how they moved. A proud stride, a confident step, a sway of the hip mistaken for seduction, and so they invented pain that lived in the feet. Because when a woman cannot walk without screaming, she learns to stay still. She learns to be quiet, to shrink, to disappear. After the iron shoes were removed, if they were removed, you never walk the same again. Flesh fused, toes blackened. Some women lost feet entirely. Others were left with twisted limbs dragging themselves across floors they once danced upon. The punishment ended when the body gave up, but the pain stayed, with every step, for the rest of your life. It doesn't look like much at first, just a set of metal tongs, 4 sharp claws at the end of each jaw, hinged in the middle, rusted at the teeth, cold even near the fire, but in the wrong hands. In the right hands, according to the men who designed it. This was not a tool, it was a message. You're stripped to the waist, not for medical reasons, not for burial, but for exposure. Your arms are tied behind your back, the rope bites into your wrists, your chest rises and falls too quickly, not from shame, not from modesty, from knowing exactly what's coming. You're accused of adultery, or seduction, or tempting a priest, or bearing a child out of wedlock. It doesn't matter if it's true. What matters is that someone claimed it loud enough for others to hear, and in the Dark Ages a woman's body was not her defence, it was her evidence. The device is heated in the fire, not to cleanse it, to amplify it, because flesh tears easily when it's raw, and the pain lingers longer when nerves are burned open. The executioner doesn't ask if you're ready. He doesn't speak to you at all. He clamps the breast ripper around your left breast, carefully, precisely, until the claws dig just beneath the skin. The pain doesn't come in a scream. It comes in a sharp inhale, a quiver in your knees, the knowledge that you can't breathe fully without moving deeper into the blades, and then they pull. The claws tear backward, outward, downward. Your scream rips through the room, but no one listens, because this isn't torture for a confession. It's punishment for existence, for having a body that was noticed, or touched, or whispered about. Sometimes they stopped after one breast. Sometimes they moved to the other. Sometimes, if you were lucky, the bleeding was quick. If not, the wounds festered, became infected, turned septic. You didn't die from the device, you died from what it left behind, and even if you survived, you never recovered. The breast ripper wasn't just meant to mutilate, it was designed to erase, to strip away the parts of a woman that men found dangerous. Softness, desire, milk, motherhood, the very symbols of femininity turned into wounds. In some cases, the device wasn't even heated. It was used cold, to freeze skin as it tore. In others, it was ceremonial, presented in courtrooms before an audience. Sometimes the woman wasn't guilty at all, just inconvenient. The punishment made sure no one ever asked again. You would wear high collars, you would avoid mirrors, you would flinch at kindness, because the pain wasn't just physical, it was public, and that was the point. They didn't just want to silence you, they wanted to make you visible in the worst way possible, so every other woman watching would know, what is soft can be torn, what is full can be emptied, what is sacred can be shattered, and it would all be done legally, righteously, cleanly documented in the scrolls of law and the mouths of priests, because a punished woman was a safe woman, and a woman without a chest was no longer a threat. They say the rack was equal, that it broke all bodies the same way. Ankle by ankle, wrist by wrist, pulled until the joints unhinged and the limbs no longer knew where they belonged. But that was a lie. Because when a woman was tied to the rack, it wasn't just bone they were after, it was proof. Proof that she had secrets buried deep. Proof that her silence was guilt. Proof that her pain could be stretched into something usable. You're led to the table, flat, wooden, stained dark with history. 4 wheels at the ends, ropes already threaded. Your dress is torn at the seams so it won't interfere. Your body, they say, must be seen. They tie your ankles first, then your wrists. Tight, but not too tight. You need to feel everything. The crank turns slowly, not out of mercy, but out of calculation, because the rack isn't about tearing, not right away. It's about pulling, 1 notch at a time. Your arms begin to tremble, your shoulders lift from the wood, your knees strain against the restraints. The ache becomes a burn, then the burn becomes a scream. But it's early. They haven't even dislocated anything yet. They watch your face. They ask questions about lovers, about children, about herbs in your satchel and dreams in your sleep. They want names of other women, of midwives, of widows who smiled too long. And if you hesitate, the wheel turns again. Your joints begin to separate. Your spine curves unnaturally. Your body becomes a map of defiance and submission, rewritten by tension. Men were broken this way too. Rebels, thieves, traitors. But when women were stretched on the rack, it was usually for something harder to prove. Witchcraft. And witches, they believed, hid their magic inside the body. So the rack was used not to uncover the truth, but to excavate it. If you bled between your legs, they said it was the devil weeping. If you screamed too sweetly, they said it was a spell. If you passed out and woke again, they said Satan had kissed you back to life. There was no escape, and the worst part. The tearing wasn't always visible. Sometimes the tendons snapped quietly. Sometimes the damage happened deep in the hips, in the pelvis. Women stretched on the rack often never walked again. Others couldn't bear children. Their bodies became unstitched, slowly, carefully, permanently. Afterward, they were left in the same rooms they'd been broken in, laid out like tools no longer needed. Some were pardoned, some were executed, all were ruined. Because the rack wasn't just about information, it was about transformation, taking something human and making it forget itself, taking a woman and turning her into something unrecognisable, something that would never be feared again. They said the rack was fair, but fairness doesn't twist a womb until it won't hold life. It doesn't rip a shoulder to silence a sentence. It doesn't stretch a woman for sins no one can see. The rack was never neutral. It was designed to remember who you were and erase it, inch by inch. It was supposed to be holy, a place of prayer, of peace, of retreat from the sins of the world. But inside the cloister, behind thick stone walls and barred chapel doors, there was another kind of ritual, one not written in scripture, one not whispered in sermons, one soaked in water and silence. You're a novice, a young woman, or a wayward wife sent to the convent for penance, maybe a noble's daughter who questioned too much. You enter believing in mercy. But the mercy of the cloister doesn't come with grace. It comes with control. They call it purification. You're told to kneel by the font. Your dress is already damp. The floor beneath you is colder than ice. A nun, old, veiled, silent, pours a bucket of water over your head. You flinch. They pour another and another. There's no heat in it, no prayer behind it, just the repeated shock of cold drowning every thought you've ever had. You try to breathe, but the water chokes you faster than the guilt ever did. This is not baptism. This is submission. If you resist, if you cry, shiver, fall to the floor, they lift you by the hair. Not roughly, but firmly, as if they've done this before. As if your suffering is a ritual they've memorized. The church said women were more susceptible to sin, so the body had to be washed. Again, and again, and again. Some were plunged into barrels of holy water until they passed out. Others were tied to stone basins and left to pray while freezing. A few were led to underground cells, where water dripped steadily from ceilings, hour after hour, erasing sleep, thought, and sanity. The pain wasn't meant to scar. It was meant to erase you quietly, to make your sins drip out with every shiver, to chill your defiance into stillness, to turn flesh into obedience, and always without blood. Because here, the torture wasn't called torture, it was called cleansing. It was silent, acceptable, sanctified by nuns who smiled while your teeth clacked against each other, while your skin turned blue, while your prayers turned into gasps. They whispered scripture as they stripped you. The body is a temple, so they flooded it. The most dangerous women were the ones who didn't scream, the ones who stared ahead and let it happen, because they knew what the others didn't, that this was never about faith. It was about removal, removing the voice, the question. The girl who kissed another girl, the woman who didn't want a husband, the widow who inherited too much. The water would take all of that, and when it didn't. The church had other ways: fire, rope, exile. But water was always first, because it left the fewest marks, because it looked clean, because it sounded merciful. And mercy, twisted just right, can drown you slower than sin ever could. They bring it into the room like it's a throne, heavy, iron, shaped like any other chair, 4 legs, high back, wide seat. But every inch of it, arms, seat, backrest, is covered in spikes, hundreds, maybe thousands. They call it the interrogation seat, but it's not for questions, it's for waiting. You're made to strip from the waist down, no explanation, no ceremony, only the chair and the quiet expectation that you will sit. You hesitate. They force you down, not with violence, not at first, but with pressure, a firm push on your shoulders, the suggestion of knives if you don't comply. And then, slowly, your flesh meets the iron, and the iron does not yield. It stabs, not deep, not at first, but just enough to break skin, to pierce the surface and let the blood rise drop by drop until you feel it pooling beneath you. You scream. They ignore you, because the chair isn't meant to kill, it's meant to transform time. You sit for minutes, then hours. They leave you there, naked, shivering, your skin slowly moulding around cold, rusted nails. Every time you shift your weight to breathe, or to relieve pressure from one thigh, another set of spikes drives deeper somewhere else. There is no position that eases the pain. There is no part of your body untouched. They light a fire beneath the chair, not because you're cold, because they want the metal to heat from below, slowly. So the longer you sit, the more the nails begin to burn. You don't scream anymore. You shake. Your body drips. Sweat. Blood. Terror. You're no longer a woman accused of anything. You are a body, redefined by stillness. This was the punishment for women who would not yield. Healers. Widows. Girls who refused to name their lovers. Midwives accused of sorcery. They were told, sit and think. As if thought could survive that kind of agony. Sometimes the guards returned hours later. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes the woman was lifted out in silence. Sometimes she was dead. No one wrote down the screams, but they remembered how long each one lasted. The nails weren't sharpened like knives. They didn't slice, they embedded. So when the woman stood, if she could, her own flesh tore away from the seat. Some fainted, some didn't. But all left something behind. A piece of thigh, a strip of back, a smear of blood that marked how long they had lasted. And they were never the same. Not because the body can't heal, but because stillness became terrifying. Because sitting something so human, so ordinary, was now an act of violence replayed with every step of recovery. The chair of nails was meant to immobilize, not just the body, but the will, because a woman who could not sit, could not run, could not kneel in defiance, was safer to the church, to the state, to the world that feared her voice. So they gave her a throne and filled it with teeth. They didn't need to kill you. That was the trick. Death was quick, clean, a release. And women weren't meant to be released. They were meant to be witnessed. Because in the Dark Ages, the body of a woman wasn't a vessel for the soul. It was a surface on which shame could be written, control could be practiced, and punishment could be made permanent. Even after the rack, the whip, the pear, the nails, there was always something left to break. Fingers could be crushed in vices, teeth pulled with no reason but silence, hair torn from the root until the scalp bled prayers, genitals burned with hot iron rods, not to kill, but to purify. There was no ending, only exhaustion, only repetition. She disobeyed? Strip her. She lied. Cut her tongue. She looked a man in the eye. Lock her in iron. She loved someone she wasn't supposed to. Bury her halfway and let the village finish the job. Each wound had a ritual, each punishment a justification, each scream a function. Because the woman wasn't being punished for her actions, she was being reshaped. Her body turned into a living record of what happens when softness resists, when obedience fails, when survival isn't quiet enough. There were women who endured all of it, and still stood, still breathed, but they were not free, because freedom requires memory, and their memories were full of cages. Some women never healed. Their spines twisted. Their mouths would not close properly. Their eyes blinked unevenly. Their hands couldn't hold their children. And still, they were not considered punished enough. Because a punished woman had to accept, not just survive. She had to thank the priest, bow to the magistrate, kiss the hands that lit the fire. She had to walk back into the world wearing what was left of her and pretend it was whole. The cruelty wasn't random. It was structured, taught, passed down, generation to generation. The tools were made with purpose, the rooms designed for echoes, the laws rewritten so often that the punishments outlived the crimes. And when history tried to forget, it was women who remembered. They passed it in lullabies, in warnings whispered near kitchen fires, in the way a mother taught her daughter not to speak too loudly, not to walk alone, not to say no. Because somewhere deep in the collective spine of every woman was the memory of being stretched, burned, ripped, drowned, silenced. And even now, when the iron chairs have rusted, when the racks are gone, when the cloisters are museums, the fear remains, not as paranoia, as inheritance, because a body that was broken endlessly doesn't vanish. It becomes legend, it becomes law, it becomes normal. And maybe that's the darkest punishment of all, that the women who endured were never celebrated, only warned, never honoured, only erased. Their bodies were broken so thoroughly, so publicly, that centuries later we still tell their stories in whispers, and even now, when you speak her name, you look over your shoulder, just in case.